Brilliant work on this turnaround plan. Your vision saved us. I watched the lead investor, Pierce, clasp Spencer's shoulder like they were old friends celebrating something monumental. The handshake lasted too long. The smile was too wide. Spencer leaned back in his leather chair with this relaxed, unearned confidence that made my chest tighten. There were 18 people in that room, every single one of them looking at him like he had just single-handedly pulled the company back from the edge of absolute collapse. And maybe he had, if you asked him, or if you asked anyone in that room in that exact moment. But I knew the truth. I knew the exhausting reality of the situation. I was Malcolm, a 55-year-old financial strategist with 30 years of experience under my belt. I had joined Apex Crest 7 years ago, back in the year 2018, hoping to spend the final chapters of my career doing meaningful work. Instead, I found myself in a corporate environment that valued talk over substance. Spencer had been fast-tracked by our boss, Roland, simply because he was a smooth talker who knew how to tell managers exactly what they wanted to hear. I was left in the background because I did not fit their mold of a polished corporate executive. I had spent the last 5 months rebuilding our international expansion model from scratch. 5 months of 14-hour days, surviving on cold coffee and raw determination, while Spencer left every Wednesday at 1 in the afternoon for his standing squash matches with corporate executives. I spent those long months running projections until my brain felt numb, identifying the massive holes in our international growth plan that were bleeding money faster than anyone wanted to admit. I mapped out a step-by-step approach to stop the hemorrhaging and actually turn things around. The numbers were mine. Every single calculation, the projections showing which markets to abandon and which to double down on were mine. The risk mitigation strategies that would save us from another disaster were all mine. I had even color-coded the spreadsheets so the board could follow along without getting lost in the dense financial data. Spencer had contributed exactly two things: his name on the presentation file and his ability to show up on time. Thank you. I really appreciate that, Spencer said to the investor. His voice had this humble quality to it, like he was trying not to brag but could not help feeling proud. I waited. I sat there and waited for 6 seconds, 12 seconds, 18 seconds. I expected him to mention my name, or at least glance in my direction to acknowledge the contribution. He did not. He just kept smiling and nodding, soaking in the collective admiration of the board of directors. Pierce moved on to the next board member, still talking about Spencer's innovative thinking. Someone else chimed in about his strategic vision. Another person mentioned how impressive it was that he had managed to identify problems that our entire leadership team had overlooked. Spencer just nodded along, taking it all in, soaking up praise for work he could not have done if someone held a manual to his head and read it out loud. I sat in my chair, fingers laced together in my lap, watching this whole theater unfold like I was outside my own body, like I was watching it happen to a stranger. But it was happening to me. The meeting wrapped up, people started gathering their folders, shaking hands and making small talk about lunch plans and upcoming holidays. Spencer stood up, buttoning his jacket, chatting with one of the board members about golf courses in the area. I reached up and unclipped my visitor badge from my shirt. The plastic was warm from being against my chest for the last 2 hours. I set it down on the table, right between the two water pitchers someone had brought in earlier, then I stood up. I looked around the room, taking in the faces of the people I had worked with for years. I am done here, effective immediately, I said. My voice was calm, but it cut through the chatter. The room did not go quiet, but people stopped mid-sentence. The board member Spencer was talking to looked over at me with this confused expression, like I had just started speaking in a foreign tongue. My boss, Roland, took a step toward me, his brow furrowed. "What are you talking about, Malcolm?" Roland asked. "I am resigning right now," I replied. "I will send you something in writing by the end of standard business hours, but consider this my official notice." Spencer finally looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw a flicker of panic in his expression that he tried to cover up real quick. "Let us talk about this outside, Malcolm," Roland said, already moving toward the door. "There is nothing to talk about," I said. I walked out. I just turned and left while they all stood there trying to figure out what had just happened. I did not run. I did not storm out. I just walked at a normal pace through the building, got into my car, and drove home. That was the day I stopped letting other people take what was mine. I had spent 30 years playing the quiet corporate game, and I was finally finished. Roland started texting within 15 minutes. Then the messages turned into phone calls. I let the first few go to voicemail, but by the 22nd attempt, I picked up just to make the noise stop. "You are overreacting," Roland said, skipping any hello or asking if I was okay. He went straight into telling me I was wrong. He was just accepting praise for the team. That is what team leaders do. "Team leaders," I repeated. "Spencer is a team leader now?" "You know what I mean," Roland sighed. "He was representing the work you both did." "Both did?" I challenged. "Roland, tell me one single thing Spencer did on that project besides edit the title page." Silence on his end. It was long enough that I almost thought the connection had dropped. "It is more complicated than that," Roland finally said. "Spencer has relationships with those investors. They trust him. That matters in these situations. So, I do the work and he gets the applause because people like his personality better? That is not what I am saying." "Then what are you saying?" More silence. Then Roland said, "Sleep on it. Do not make any rash decisions. We can figure this out tomorrow." I hung up. Here is what nobody tells you about quitting in a moment like that. The rest of your day feels incredibly strange. I went home and sat in my living room for an hour, not watching anything, not reading anything, just sitting there thinking about every other time something like this had happened. When my wife came home and I told her the news, she did not panic. She looked at me, smiled, and congratulated me on finally standing up for myself. She knew how much of my life I had poured into that company with zero recognition. There had been smaller versions of it for years. Spencer taking my ideas in team meetings and rephrasing them like they had just occurred to him. Spencer's name appearing first on project reports, where I had done 95% of the analytical writing. Spencer getting invited to leadership dinners while I stayed latest finishing work that had both our names on it. I had told myself it did not matter, that the work spoke for itself, and that eventually people would notice who was actually producing results. But they had not noticed. They just kept praising Spencer. That night, I updated my professional profiles. I did not make some angry post about what happened. I just quietly updated my experience, my skills, and the specific projects I had worked on. I made sure every turnaround strategy I had developed was listed under my name with details about the outcomes. Then I went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to 3 messages from people I had never met. Investment managers at different groups. They had seen my profile updates. They had heard about the turnaround model I had built, and they wanted to know if I was available to help with their struggling acquisitions. At first, I thought maybe Roland had sent them my way as some kind of peace offering. But when I talked to the first one, he mentioned he had been trying to track me down for weeks after hearing about my work through industry contacts. "We have got a similar situation," he told me. "A company that expanded too fast, burning money in the wrong markets. I heard you are the person who knows how to fix this kind of thing." "Where did you hear that?" I asked. "People talk," he said. "Your model has been making the rounds in our circles. Everyone wants to know who built it." It was my name they were looking for, not Spencer's. By the end of that first week, I had 9 different investment groups asking me to consult on their failing portfolios. They did not want someone to just patch problems. They want someone who could look at a broken expansion strategy and rebuild it from the ground up. That was my specialty. I started saying yes, 1 project at a time at first, then 2 at once, then 5. The work was intense, but in a different way than before. Instead of spending months on a single project while someone else got celebrated for it, I was spending weeks on each one, getting paid what I should have been making in a year, and getting thanked by the actual decision makers who knew exactly who did the work. Roland kept trying to reach me, less frequently as the days went on, but still he would send messages asking if I would reconsider, saying they really needed me back and that things were not the same without me. I did not respond. Spencer tried exactly once. A single text message that said, "I hope there are no hard feelings. You are really talented and I am sure you will do great things." I blocked his number. 8 weeks after I walked out of that investor meeting, my situation had completely changed. I was working with 14 different investment portfolios, making more money than I thought possible, and getting recognized by name when I walked into meetings. People listened when I talked. Nobody interrupted me to rephrase what I had just said. Nobody's name appeared on my work except mine, and then Roland's name showed up on my phone again late on a Thursday evening. I stared at the flashing screen for 10 seconds before deciding to answer, wanting to hear what he had to say. I almost did not pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. "We need help." Roland's voice sounded strained and tired. "The expansion is hemorrhaging money worse than before. The board wants you back. Name your price." I let the silence sit in the air for a moment. I imagined him in his office, probably pacing, probably desperate. "What happened to your brilliant strategist, Spencer?" I asked. The pause that followed told me everything. "He cannot replicate the results," Roland admitted. "Replicate?" I laughed. "Roland, did you really think he could? He did not create the system. You cannot replicate something you never understood in the first place. He is just a presenter, not a strategist." "Please, Malcolm, we are losing everything," Roland pleaded. "The board is panicking. I am being told to fix this or they are cleaning house. Your model was supposed to save us, but without you here to implement it, it is falling apart." "My model is fine," I said. "Your execution is the problem. Then come back and execute it. Whatever you want. Whatever it takes." What Roland did not know was that before I walked out, I had secured the rights to my proprietary model. Years prior to joining the firm, I had spent hundreds of hours of my personal time designing a highly customized database architecture and predictive math model. I had registered this proprietary software and the underlying code with the United States Copyright Office, ensuring that I held full ownership of the intellectual property. When I was hired at Apex Crest, I did not sell the system to them. I merely granted them a non-exclusive, revocable license to use it for their internal testing. The day I resigned, I formally sent a notification revoking that temporary license, which cut off their legal right to run my algorithms, desperate to show progress and save their own skins. Roland and Spencer had attempted to bypass my security parameters. They tried to copy the proprietary database structure, and they utilized my copyrighted Excel templates to continue running calculations for their board reports. However, my system was built with automated security logs that tracked every external server access. I received several automated email alerts showing Apex Crest server IP addresses, trying to force their way into the compiled code files. They had tried to reverse engineer my intellectual property to hide their dependency. I immediately consulted my intellectual property attorney, Grover, whose office was lined with mahogany shelves filled with heavy legal texts. Grover was a calm, methodical lawyer who understood how to protect independent creators against corporate exploitation. We drafted a formal cease and desist letter that went straight to the board of directors. The letter outlined their blatant violations of the Defend Trade Secrets Act under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1836. It also detailed direct copyright infringement under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106. We made it clear that we were prepared to file a federal lawsuit, and we would seek statutory damages of up to $150,000 for every single instance of willful infringement, plus all legal fees. The board members were absolutely terrified of the personal liability and the corporate scandal. "I will consult," I told Roland, "but I am not coming back as an employee. I work for myself now. I will not put myself in a position where my intellectual property is vulnerable." "Fine, whatever. Name your terms," Roland said. "My rate is 5 times my old salary, calculated on a consulting basis, paid weekly in advance," I said. "You are paying me what I am worth now, not what you decided I was worth before. Second, I present directly to the board and investors. No intermediaries, no managers, no one else's name on my work, just mine." "Of course, absolutely. We can agree to that. And there is one more condition," I added. "Spencer sits in that room while I do it." Silence. "Roland, did you hear me?" "I heard you, Malcolm," he said quietly. "I just do not understand why that is necessary. Because I want him to watch while I explain every single thing he claimed as his own." Every decision point where he had accepted their applause, every calculation he could not reproduce. I want him to sit there while the same people who praised him realize exactly what happened. That is the condition. Take it or I hang up, and you can deal with the federal lawsuit and the board yourselves. More silence. Then, I will make it happen. We set the meeting for 3 weeks out. That gave me time to finish up my current consulting projects and prepare my presentation. Those 3 weeks felt longer than the previous 8 combined. I kept working with my other clients, building my reputation, but part of my brain was already planning what I would say in that boardroom. I was not nervous, I was focused. The night before the meeting, I slept soundly, feeling a deep sense of anticipation. Tomorrow the truth was going to be laid bare, and the legal weight of my proprietary rights would ensure they had no room to wiggle out. I showed up 20 minutes early. The building looked the same as it had 8 weeks ago, but walking into it felt completely different. Last time I was an employee, hoping someone would notice my work. This time, I was an independent expert they were paying premium rates to rescue them from a disaster of their own making. I walked past the receptionist desk, noticing the quiet whispers among the staff who recognized me. Roland met me in the lobby. He looked terrible. He had deep shadows under his eyes and his shirt was wrinkled. "Thank you for coming," he said. "The board is already gathering. They are very eager to hear from you." "Is Spencer here?" I asked. "He is here." Roland nodded. I told him he needed to attend as part of the technical transition team. He did not have much of a choice. We walked through the building toward the same boardroom. My footsteps echoed on the tile. I had chosen a sharp, tailored suit that commanded respect. The room was full when we entered. 18 people were present. The full board of directors, the investors who had been threatening to pull out, senior leadership, and Spencer, who was sitting near the back, looking incredibly small and pale. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. He looked away instantly, his face turning red with embarrassment. "Everyone, this is Malcolm," Roland announced. "He will be walking us through the expansion strategy and its implementation." Several board members nodded. Pierce, the lead investor who had praised Spencer 8 weeks ago, stood up and shook my hand. "We have heard a lot about you, Malcolm. People in the industry speak very highly of your work." "I appreciate that, Pierce," I said. Everyone found their seats. I moved to the front of the room, connected my laptop, and pulled up my presentation. I did not rush. I walked them through every single phase of the model. I started with the initial financial assessment, showing how I had identified which markets were draining resources. I explained the analysis I had run on their expansion timeline and the specific points where decisions had been made without adequate data. "This section here," I said, pointing to a complex financial projection, "required understanding the local banking regulations in 4 different countries. I spent 3 weeks researching compliance requirements because one mistake here would have meant legal exposure worth millions." One of the board members, an older woman named Miriam with sharp analytical eyes, leaned forward. She adjusted her glasses and stared at the projection screen. "Spencer, did you help with this compliance section?" I did not look at Spencer. I kept my focus on Miriam. "I worked on this section entirely alone," I stated. "It required specific knowledge of international finance law and database programming that Spencer does not possess. I wrote the code myself and compiled it." Spencer stayed quiet. I moved to the next part, the risk mitigation strategies. I explained the market-by-market breakdown and the timeline for implementation. "The key insight here," I explained, "was recognizing that the problem was not the expansion itself, but the pace. You moved into markets that required 4 to 6 years of relationship building before profitability, but you expected returns in 24 months. That mismatch was killing you." Pierce was taking notes, completely engaged. "How did you identify that specific mismatch?" he asked. "Historical analysis of similar expansions in the same regions, cross-referenced with local economic reports. It took about 60 hours of research, but once the pattern became clear, the recommendations followed naturally." Miriam spoke up again. She looked directly at Spencer. "Spencer, can you explain to the board how the inflation adjustment factor is integrated into this specific formula? That seems to be where our team struggled last month when attempting to update the models." Spencer stammers, his hands trembling as he shuffled through some papers in front of him. Well, we used standard industry multipliers to adjust for local market conditions, he mumbled, his voice cracking slightly under the pressure. That is incorrect, I said quietly. We did not use multipliers. We used a dynamic regression model that adjusts based on real-time consumer price index data. Spencer, do you know what a consumer price index regression is? Or how to adjust the database parameters for it? Spencer stared at me, his mouth half open. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. Pierce leaned back in his chair, his expression turning cold. He crossed his arms and shook his head. Miriam spoke up again. And the implementation plan? How confident are you that this will work? The model is sound, I said. The issue you have been having is execution. The strategy requires someone who understands not just what to do, but why each step matters and how they connect. You cannot follow it like a recipe. You have to understand the underlying principles, which is why it failed when Spencer tried to run it without authorization. Pierce said slowly, "We thought we could just follow the plan. But without understanding the reasoning, it falls apart the moment you hit an unexpected variable." Exactly, I said. Which you did multiple times. I glanced at Spencer. He was staring at his hands, his jaw clenched tight. The room was silent except for my voice, laying out the technical details he had pretended to master. Every director in the room was now looking at Spencer with a mixture of disappointment and irritation. I spent the next 2 hours answering every question, clarifying every detail, and walking them through scenarios. By the end, the energy in the room had completely shifted. The investors who had been ready to pull out were talking about moving forward. The board members were focused and engaged. "This is exceptional work, Malcolm," Pierce said. "I have to ask, when we were here 8 weeks ago, we were told this was Spencer's strategy. Can you clarify the collaboration process?" The room got very still. I looked at Spencer, making sure everyone saw me looking at him, then I turned back to Pierce. There was no collaboration. I built this strategy alone over 5 months. Spencer's contribution was attending the presentation where I explained it to you. You could feel the shift. Board members exchanged glances. Pierce looked over at Spencer. "Is that accurate, Spencer?" Spencer opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. "I mean, we worked as a team." "Answer the question," Miriam cut in, her voice sharp. "Did you develop this strategy?" "I was involved in the project," Spencer stammered. "That is not what I asked," Miriam said. The silence stretched out. Spencer's face had gone red from embarrassment. He was cornered in front of the people whose respect he had been borrowing. "No," he finally muttered. "I did not develop it." Nobody said anything for a long moment. Then Roland cleared his throat. "Spencer, I think we need to have a separate conversation about this." "I think we all need to have that conversation," Pierce said, his tone matter-of-fact. "We made investment decisions based on our assessment of your leadership team's capabilities. If that assessment was inaccurate, we need to understand why. We cannot back a company that allows credit theft." Spencer shifted in his seat. "I never said I created it myself. You all just assumed." "You accepted praise for it," I interrupted, keeping my voice level. "When Pierce told you it was brilliant work, you thanked him. You did not correct him. You did not mention my name. You let everyone in that room believe you had done something you had not done." "Stop trying to defend it," Miriam told Spencer. "We have heard enough. Malcolm, let us talk about moving forward with implementation. What do you need from us?" I spent the next 30 minutes outlining the implementation plan. Spencer sat there the entire time, not contributing, not speaking unless directly addressed, which he was not. When the meeting finally wrapped up, people came up to thank me individually. Spencer left without saying goodbye to anyone. Roland caught up with me as I was packing my laptop. "That was intense," he said. "That was honest," I replied. "I know. And you are right. I should have paid closer attention to who was actually doing the work. We are going to make changes. Spencer is being moved to a different role where he cannot claim ownership of other people's work." "That is your decision to make," I said. "I am just here to fix the expansion." Over the next 10 weeks, I worked with them on execution as an independent consultant. The turnaround started showing results within a month. Markets they exited stopped draining resources. Markets they doubled down on started generating the returns I had projected. Spencer, meanwhile, got transferred to a minor role in a different city. He requested a transfer within 5 months, unable to handle seeing the company recover using a strategy everyone now knew he had not created. My consulting practice continued to grow. The 14 portfolios became 20, then 28. By the end of the first year, I had worked with 45 different portfolios, making more in a month than I had made in a year at my old job. I even set up a comfortable new office space for my firm with big windows and a large whiteboard to map out financial structures. 3 years after that presentation, I was keynoting at a major industry event talking about turnaround strategies. There were 900 people in the audience. As I was leaving the stage, Pierce stopped me. "That presentation you gave 3 years ago when you exposed the credit theft. I wanted to tell you something." After that meeting, our board implemented new policies about attribution and recognition. We require detailed contribution logs on major projects now. We verify claims during presentations. What you did changed how we operate. "That is good," I said. It needed to happen. I stood in the empty auditorium thinking about the moment I had placed my visitor badge on the table and walked out. How it had felt like destroying something I had built. But what came next was better. More honest, more sustainable, and entirely mine. The revenge was not destroying Spencer's career. He had done that himself. The real revenge was building something so successful that it made walking away the best decision of my life. Thank you so much for listening. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment, hit the like button, and subscribe. Choosing yourself is never a mistake. My life is now filled with opportunities that I create myself, and I am grateful for that day I decided to walk away. It was the start of something beautiful. Thank you for being here.